Good day, everyone. Today, we will be discussing financing any enterprise. The methods of financing. Funds for financing an engineering or any business enterprise may be classified into two. First, equity, and second, borrowed or debt. Equity capital is owned by the investors in the enterprise, and they expect to earn profit from their investment. However, there is no obligation to pay them when there is no profit. So when funds are borrowed, the borrower is supposed to pay interest and to repay the principal on a specific date, whether or not the operations of the enterprise have been profitable or not. For example, sa mga loans. Loans are fixed obligations, and failure to repay them on time usually leads to embarrassment or foreclosure of the property pledged as collateral. Foreclosure is a process that begins when a borrower fails to make their mortgage payments. For example, sa mga balay. So when a homeowner stops paying on a loan used to purchase a home, the home is deemed to be in foreclosure. So, ultimately means that the ownership of the home switches from the homeowner to the bank or lender that provided the loan. Working capital. Working or circulating capital includes all those funds are required to make the enterprise a going concern, which there are two kinds. First, the initial, second, and the regular working capital. So what is initial working capital? Initial working capital is the amount needed at the beginning of operations and permits the enterprise to begin functioning before it receives any income from the sales of its products or service, while regular working capital is what is needed when operations have been in progress for sufficient time and have been normalized, and it is usually less than initial working capital. So what are the types of business organizations? The three principal types of business organizations are namely, first, the individual ownership or sole proprietorship, second, the partnership, and lastly, the corporation. So what is sole proprietorship? It is the simplest form of any business organization wherein the business is owned entirely by one person who is responsible for the operations. All profits that are obtained from the business are his alone. Pero napod siya disadvantage because kung na yung mga loss, siya ra po yung mag-face, wala siya kadamay. Next, partnership. It is an association of two or more persons for the purpose of engaging in a business for profit. So advantage sa partnership kay two or more persons with different talents or abilities may group together for their common welfare. For example, an engineer may associate with a capable salesman and together, the business may be more successful than if owned by one man. Pero napod siya disadvantage. The amount of capital is definitely limited by the resources of the partners. Next, the corporation. Corporation is a distinct legal entity separate from the individuals who own it, and which can engage in practically any business transaction which a real person could do. It is considered the most important type of business organization and may have perpetual life if desired. Since it is a legal entity, it may sue or be sued in its own name. So advantage sa corporation kay enjoys perpetual life. The corporation does not die with the death of any one member or even of all the members. Pero napod siya disadvantage. The activities of a corporation are limited lang to those stated in its charter, and it is relatively complicated in formation and administration. So the dangers of the corporation form of business organization. It may be well to consider the dangers attendant to the formation of corporations. The corporation has been stated as the best form of business organization, but there are abuses and dangers which could be weighed in its formation. Some of these are: first, the dishonesty of promoters. Dishonesty of the promoters have been some cases where certain persons have taken the initiative in forming corporations where their only interest is in the promotion fees which they can collect after the formation of the corporation and not in the enterprise itself. The second, dishonesty of management. The officers of the corporation may be dishonest, and their only aim may be to enrich themselves at the expense of the stockholders by paying themselves unreasonably large salaries, and by employing their relatives and paying them salaries far in excess of their capabilities or the value of the job they are holding. Third, watering of stocks. The stocks of a corporation are said to be watered if the amount of stocks issued is far in excess of the actual value of the assets of the corporation. The watered stocks, which do not represent any assets, often go to the dishonest officers of the corporation, earn the same dividends as the other stocks to the detriment of the stockholders. And lastly, the absentee ownership. In the sole proprietorship and partnership forms of business organizations, the sole owner or the partners take an active hand in the administration of the enterprise. In the corporation, however, most of the stockholders may know nothing of the affairs of the business because they are not employed in the enterprise. Usually, a stockholder is satisfied if he gets a large annual dividend, without his knowing that these dividends may have been obtained through the payment of low wages to its workers or by some other means. Capitalization of corporation. A corporation is capitalized through the sale of shares of stock. And there are two principal types of capital stock, namely common stock and preferred stock. There are many varieties which exist within these classes relative to income, control, and other matters. If only one class of stock is issued, it is usually called common stock. Pero ginatawag po na siya usay og capital stock. So what is common stock? Common stock represents the ownership of stockholders who have a residual claim on the assets of the corporation after all other claims have been settled. No return is guaranteed on the investment of common stockholders. Common stockholders as owners of the corporation have certain legal rights. For example, kanang to call and hold meetings, usually upon the request of a majority of the stockholders. So what is preferred stock? Preferred stock also represents ownership, and it possesses the same rights as common stock. But in addition, it enjoys certain preferences not possessed by common stock. Preferred stock has a priority over common stock in the receipts of dividends, and it is usually guaranteed a fixed annual dividends, regardless the amount of the earnings of the corporation. In case the corporation is dissolved, the owner of the preferred stock has priority over the assets before the common stockholders. So let's go to bonds. So what are bonds? A bond is a certificate of indebtedness of corporation, usually for a period not less than 10 years, and guaranteed by a mortgage on certain assets of the corporation or its subsidiaries. So silbi ang bonds, mo ni siya silbi ang kasulatan. And it is classified into several ways. Bonds may be classified according to the method of payment of interest, as to the security behind the bond, and in many other ways. So according to the method of paying interest, bonds are classified into two: the registered bonds and coupon bonds. In all registered bonds, the owner's name is recorded in the books of the corporation, and interest is paid periodically to the owners without their asking for it. Magsilbi ang registered bonds mo ni ang mga ledgers, di na lagi pang list mga ngalan sa mga corporation. Second, coupon bonds. These are bonds to which are attached coupons indicating the interest due and the date when such interest is to be paid. The owner can collect the interest due by surrendering the same to the officers of the corporation or cashing it at specified banks.
So, continuation of the report. According to the security behind the bonds, the classification is as follows. First, mortgage bonds are bonds whose security is a mortgage on certain specified assets of corporation. If the corporation fails to pay the bond value on the date of maturity, title to the property is transferred to the bondholders who may take possession and sell the same to reimburse the amounts they have invested. So if nabigo ang corporation na bayaran ang bond value sa petsa ng kapanahunan, ang titulo sa ari-arian kay mabalhin sa mga bondholders or investors na pwedeng manag-iya or magbaligya same price sa amount na ilahang gi-invest. Second, collateral trust bonds. The corporation pledges securities which it owns, such as stocks or bonds of one of its subsidiaries. In case of default in the payment of the bond value, at maturity the bondholders have to depend on the assets of the subsidiaries for redemption of their investment. However, the issuing corporation includes a guarantee involving its properties to enhance the value of the bond to prospective investors. Third, equipment obligation bonds. A bond that is issued with specific equipment, pledged as in collateral against the bonds. It refers primarily to a bonds whose guarantee is a lien on railroad equipment such as freight and passenger cars, locomotives, and other railroad equipment. Fourth, debenture bonds. These are bonds without any security behind them except a promise to pay the issuing corporation. So, mauni ang bonds na walay seguridad maliban sa isang pangakong babayaran ng isang kumpanya. These bonds may only be issued by large and well-known firms whose records of achievement is known to the public. Fifth, joint bonds. When two or more corporations issue bonds which are guaranteed jointly and severally by them. So, they are called joint bonds. Much like the co-signer of a loan, the second party guarantee payment if the issuer defaults. This often used when a subsidiary of a parent company needs backing to get a loan. Bond amortization and retirement. Bonds represent debt, and therefore, some provisions must be made for its repayment at some future time. The amount necessary to redeem or retire bonds may be done in three ways. First, the corporation may issue another set of bonds equal to the amount of bonds due for redemption. These methods, in effect, is like manghiram kay Pedro para na ikabayad kay Jose. And that will cause the corporation to be perpetually in debt. Second, the corporation may set up a sinking fund into which payments are made periodically and usually of equal amounts. The amounts deposited, together with the interest they earn, become a maturity date equal to the amount of the bonds to be retired. The corporation, however, must, in addition to the amount set aside for a bond retirement, pay periodically the interest on the bonds. To determine the periodic payment, let A equals amount of the periodic payment, F equals the amount of the bond issue at maturity date, I equals rate of interest on the bonds per period, N equals the number of periods until the bonds are retired. So the total payment will be A equals Fi plus F times A over F, I, N equals F times A over P, I, N. Since I plus F times A over F, I, N is equals to A over P, I, N by formula. Third, the corporation may therefore float or issue callable or serial bonds. Callable bonds to be retired on a definite date are usually determined by lot, while those for serial bonds are indicated on the bond issue, and bonds are retired according to a certain schedule where the serial number of the bonds to be retired at specific date is stated. In retiring a bond issue, where a sinking fund is set up for such a purpose, the company prepares an amortization schedule which shows the methods of repaying the principal and interest. In general, amortization is defined to be any method of repaying a debt, the principal and interest included, usually by a series of equal payments at periodic intervals of time. Value of a bond. The value of a bond is defined to be the present worth of all the amounts of the bondholder will receive through his possession of the bond. The bondholder will receive two types of payments, which are a single payment which the owner will receive at the date of maturity of the bond, which is usually equal to the par value of the bond. Second, the periodic payments for the interest on the bond until it is redeemed by the issuing corporation.